People always say that excessive obsession is a dangerous thing. They're not wrong, but no one tells you just how absurdly dangerous it can be. As for me, obsession hasn't destroyed my transcript, ruined my part-time job, or thrown off my rock-solid night owl biological clock. No, it's done something bigger. It's overturned the entire reality on which I depend. My name is Suin, 20 years old, a certified ultimate bookworm, proficient in the 18 techniques of instant noodle boiling, and the most loyal disciple under the great moral Wi-Fi. My philosophy of life is so simple that it can be summarized in 3 sentences. Don't study so hard that you risk your life. Don't force yourself to fit into a bustling social circle, but never, ever belittle the fictional characters I like in front of me. That person is named Rong Shu. Yes, that Rong Shu, the notorious anti-hero in the phenomenon-level web novel The Unending Path, the path of divine punishment, who stirs up chaos and makes people tremble in fear. There are hundreds of pages of posts on the forum cursing him, every word and sentence dripping with ice. Cold-blooded tyrant, apocalypse demon, they wish to nail him to the pillar of shame and never let him rise again. Some even grind their teeth in hate, hating him for interfering and destroying the divine love between the hero and the female protagonist in the book. But I have to cheer for him. At 2 in the morning, I stared at my bloodshot rabbit eyes, my fingers flying over the keyboard, trembling at the tips, yet hyper as if I had been shot up with adrenaline. This isn't cruelty. It's pure elegance. Rong Shu is not cold at all. He's as clean as a white sheet. He wouldn't waste his time like that hero on trivial matters of love. He's focused, determined, and carries a naive innocence. You tell me, who else in the whole book can bear the heavy burden of the entire sect, and fight a path through the mess when everyone is against him? My fingers danced, and every word I typed was filled with the courage of 2 in the morning. Sure enough, within minutes, the replies in the comments section surged in like a tide. Brother, aren't you crazy? He's got the blood of over 100 cultivators on his hands. What purity! Another fanatical fan of the antagonist. For sure. Hilarious, to cheer for a crazy person who wants to burn the whole world to the ground? I didn't care at all. My fingers pounded the keyboard harder and faster, each word filled with the determination of a last-ditch effort. Those cultivators? They deserved it. It was them who were eager to kill him. And burning the world? Well, maybe this dirty world deserves to be burned clean. You only see the domineering overlord who rules with an iron fist, who is covered in blood. But what I see is the lonely boy who has never had a chance to even smile, from beginning to end. That's right, I argued with a group of strangers until the sky turned light and the first rays of dawn pierced the night, illuminating my lamp that had stayed on all night. I had no regrets. I can say without a doubt that Rong Shu is mine. Of course, not the kind of possessiveness that makes your back hair stand on end. Alright, at least in this dimension, he deserves to be loved by someone without any conditions. If this novel's world can't give it to him, then I will. Even if it means I have to type into the fan forums void every night until my fingers ache and my throat is hoarse, I'm willing to do it. Everything started just like that. But soon, strange things began to happen. The first sign was my laptop screen. At first, I thought it was just an old problem. This broken laptop's fan always sounded like a dying tractor. Overheating was a common occurrence. But this time was different. The chat box suddenly froze, and no new replies popped up. Instead, lines of cold glowing text were crawling bizarrely across the screen, like alive snakes. The system alert detected that the bound host had been identified. Suin binding reason, excessive emotional investment in target, Rong Shu. Sorry. What's going on? I rolled my eyes at the screen and my fingertips were numb. This broken laptop probably caught some absurd virus from browsing too many fanfiction novels. The cold glowing text continued to crawl, like an unstoppable curse. Congratulations, host. You have been selected by the Crash Prevention System. Core task: prevent the target, Rong Shu, from darkening, and prevent the destruction of the world. I laughed out loud, smacking the table with a palm, making the cup noodles and chopsticks jump up high, frightening the cat who was dozing on the sofa and making it hiss and leap out, its fur standing on end like dandelion seeds. Ha ha ha! Who's there? Which friend is pulling a prank on me on the forum? CSS trick? You're really getting fancy. I laughed while reaching out to turn off the screen, but my fingertips froze as soon as they touched the power button. Something was wrong. This wasn't a joke. I frantically pressed ESC, Ctrl+Alt+Delete, and prayed frantically to the icon of the task manager, almost knocking it to pieces with my keyboard. But those lines of cold glowing text were like roots that had taken hold, sticking to the screen without a hint of movement. Cold sweat soaked my back instantly. Host Suin, your contribution has been recognized. Binding completed. Then, seemingly as a cruel joke of the universe, a cold, mechanical voice directly pierced my eardrums and exploded in my cranium. Welcome, host. System initialization. I stood still. Blood instantly solidified, then surged up again, the loud sound of my heart pounding my ribs drowning out the noise of the world. Was this a hallucination? Or was this the sign of my long-awaited collapse finally happening? I heard my own voice dry as sandpaper. Are you real? I stared at the screen, my fingertips trembling even more from the effort. The window that had shown the chat history was now engulfed by an eye-watering cold blue. Dense bar graphs and jumping numbers exploded in front of my eyes, those symbols twisted and intertwined, so unfamiliar that they stopped my heart. I'm crazy. I must be crazy. The chaotic sleepiness I had been staying out for days finally shattered my reason, forcing me to babble into thin air. You're not talking nonsense. The cold, mechanical voice suddenly rang out, like an ice pick piercing my eardrum. You have been selected to stabilize the world you are obsessed with. Its narrative is collapsing. I raised my hand suddenly, my palm supporting the hot desktop, and I forced out broken sounds from my throat. Wait. You're saying the dragon book is real? The voice trembled so much it was unrecognizable, like a flute that had been bent and broken repeatedly. Absolutely. The voice was as flat as a drum, each word landing on my tensed nerves. The core theme, the dragon book, has severely deviated from the character arc. He is accumulating darkening points. The probability of world destruction is 98%. Boom. My mind went blank, my jaw seemed to be dislodged by an invisible hand, and I couldn't close it for a long time. World destruction? Darkening? That was just a broken web novel I chased updates for and browsed fanfictions. Wasn't it? It's just entertainment for you. The mechanical voice coldly dissected the truth. For the residents of that world, it's their reality. And you, due to excessive fan obsession, have already interfered with the narrative energy of the core theme, causing this collapse. How do I stabilize the narrative of this world? What methods can I use to reduce the probability of world destruction? What do I need to do to correct the character arc of the dragon book? Now, you must go and repair the damage you have caused. The cold command came crashing down, and I suddenly raised my hand to cover my face. With suppressed moans seeping through my fingers, I was just posting a few threads on the forum, arguing about how cool the antagonist was. I roared in despair, my voice filled with an unbelievable absurdity. How did it become a life-threatening job? The voice remained as unflappable as a cold machine. You must enter the narrative world. Protect the dragon book, avoid all key events that could lead to his darkening, and prevent the world from collapsing. Hold on. I suddenly dropped my hand, my eyes wide and red, and the fire in my chest was bubbling up. Even if I believed this nonsensical nonsense, why me? I raged, pulling at my hair, my voice tinged with a whine. Why don't you go find those geniuses with super intelligence? Or find someone who really understands cultivation and knows how to fight. What am I? Just a bookworm who knows nothing but to type on a keyboard. I shook my head in anger, the veins on my forehead throbbing, and I was bursting with unvented frustration. Because, the voice paused, each word clear and cruel, only you have ever poured the most steadfast positive energy into the dragon book. Boom. It was as if a fire had burst up my neck, and I froze instantly, my cheeks burning with shame. That was just a fan's preference, I stubbornly retorted, my voice unconsciously dropping lower. Correction. The cold mechanical voice mercilessly interrupted me. The intensity of energy investment has reached the terminal peak. You are the only ideal candidate. I wanted to die. All I wanted to do was scream and throw myself onto the bed, wrapping myself in the blankets, and sleep soundly until the world was dark and the world was silent, never to care about this ghost world or the ghost darkening. But reason was like a string, tightly strung. I suddenly pushed back my chair, the metal legs scraping the floor with an unpleasant sound. I began to pace around the cluttered room filled with instant noodle buckets and comic books, my steps hurried and disorganized. In the corner, my cat crouched on the cat ladder, its emerald eyes staring at me without blinking, the look in its eyes as if watching a completely crazy owner. So, let me get this straight. I stared at the cold, glowing screen in front of me, my fingers white from the strain, just because I love the dragon book so much, no, because I kept going on and on about it online. Now I'm bound to this absurd universe system, and I have to save him from darkening, or the world will completely collapse. This was sheer nonsense. This is definitely a scam. The binding is irreversible, the mechanical voice said without emotion, each word cutting deep. The host is about to be transmitted. Transmission? My pupils contracted, my body's hair standing on end, and I retreated backwards as quickly as I could. Wait. No, absolutely not. I fumbled with my panda pajamas, my cheeks flushed red. I haven't taken a bath. I'm still wearing this thing. At least let me change into something. Before the words were out, a piercing buzzing sound suddenly erupted. The laptop screen burst into a blinding white light, the light as if it had a life of its own, instantly swallowing my cramped little room and swallowing all my protests. The numbness of electricity spread through my limbs, the tip of my tongue tasted a metallic, rust-like bitterness, and my body was forcefully stuffed into a narrow passage, then dragged roughly, and my internal organs were dislocated. My last conscious thought was a crazy scream in my mind, if I have to go into the book wearing this lousy panda pajamas and fight. I swear, even if I have to scream to the ends of the universe, I will sue this lousy system into bankruptcy. And so, Suin, a hardcore fan of the Dragon Book, was abducted by an unknown system and forcibly pulled into this blood-soaked yet addictive cultivation novel. Others cross over as ordered to open up, but I was forced to take on the responsibility of saving the beautiful, strong, and pitiful male protagonist, but all I could think about was how handsome the black-robed antagonist in the book was. I had imagined countless times what it would be like to be reborn, either as a handsome and elegant noble heir, with the ability to unlock an invincible ancestral treasure as soon as I opened my eyes, or as a chosen one carrying the humming purple gas, with a group of immortal maidens and spirit pets following me, waiting to feed me 1,000-year elixir and 10,000-year grapes. But reality? Reality gave me a hard slap in the face. I landed face down on the ground. The rough pebbles dug into my chin, and my whole body felt like it had been disassembled and reassembled, every inch of bone crying out in pain. I gritted my teeth and pushed myself up. The first thing I did was to look down. Fortunately, the panda pajama pants with the panda head logo had disappeared, but in its place was a coarse, hemcloth robe that felt like sandpaper, and it emitted a damp, musty smell as if it had been left outside in a thunderstorm for 3 days and 3 nights. I leaned against the trunk of the tree beside me, barely managing to stand firm, looking around me. The winding mountain road was uneven and rugged, with ancient pines towering on both sides, shrouded in mist that swirled between the branches. In the distance, the clear, tinkling calls of birds echoed, along with the thunderous roar of waterfalls crashing against rocks. The mountain wind carried the fragrance of the herbs and trees straight into my face. It has to be said, the scenery was indeed as beautiful as a painting, not a single detail off from what was described in the book. But now I had no heart to appreciate it. The overwhelming panic in my chest was almost bursting out of my throat. System! I gritted my teeth and growled in my mind. What the hell was that just now? The host has successfully been implanted into the narrative world, the cold, mechanical voice echoed punctually. Implanted? I nearly fainted. I'm not some plug-and-play USB drive. I took a deep breath and forced down the anger in my heart. First tell me, where am I now? Host's current identity, a roving swordsman with no sect. Background, a wandering soul. Cultivation level, early chi condensation stage. Chi condensation stage? I abruptly covered my chest, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. That's not the bottom-tier trash configuration in the book. Any minor disciple could crush me to the ground. I was almost driven mad. You guys threw me into this hellhole and gave me the strength of a street vendor? The host needs to blend in quietly with the world. The system's voice was emotionless. A too strong identity setting is likely to trigger the narrative world's rejection, leading to the failure of the task. Blend in my ass. I pulled at my hair in despair. At least give me a magic item. Like a mysterious jade pendant that can knock out a Yuan Dan elder with a single punch, or a space that can infinitely generate equipment. Refused. The system's answer was decisive. Your magic item is me. I despondently covered my face, a wail escaping my throat. Heaven, I hate this shitty life. I sprawled on the cold ground, my mind flashing through countless thoughts, from jumping off a cliff to end it all, to acting crazy, to praying that all this was just a bizarre nightmare, and waking up to sink back into the warmth of my bed to read fanfiction. It took me 10 full minutes to barely suppress the urge to die on the spot. Trembling as I lifted my head and took another look at this terrifyingly real world. The towering mountains stretched up to the clouds, waterfalls pouring down in a cascade, splashing into a misty veil, the branches of the ancient pines casting dappled light through the leaves, landing on the moss-covered stones. This was not a hallucination. This was the world of Dragon Book, a world I had read over a dozen times, memorizing every chapter and every clue. So, all of this is true, I murmured, a trace of trembling in my voice. Just then, the system's reminder beeped again, like a nagging alarm clock, precisely shattering the last bit of my fluke. Warning, core theme Dragon Book, current blackening value 62%. 62%! I froze in place, my blood seemingly solidifying in an instant. This had already exceeded half of the critical value. How much time do I have left? I clenched my fists, a hint of urgency in my voice, though I barely noticed it myself. According to the current rate of blackening, the core theme will completely destroy the narrative world in 8 years. 8 years. My heart plummeted into an abyss. Host's main task: prevent the core theme from blackening. Primary target: alter the key tragic event of his youth. The key tragic event of his youth? My blood surged to my head, the contents of the pages I had read to shreds flooding into my mind. The childhood of Dragon Book was far from just childhood. It was endless beatings, the shame of being abducted by a prestigious sect as a cauldron, the desperate despair of being thrown into the beast-infested forest. Each tribulation was like a poisoned blade, deeply etching into his bones, gradually eroding the light in his eyes, eventually forcing him to become that cold, bloodthirsty, apocalyptic overlord who destroyed 3 realms. And the first tragedy would happen not long after. A chill ran down my spine, and I shivered violently. Hold on. This timeline, my pupils contracted, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. This is the point where Dragon Book was nearly killed by those self-righteous nobles and thrown into a mass grave. I swallowed hard, my throat dry and painful. I had actually been thrown into this critical moment. System! I grabbed my hair, on the verge of tears. Are you doing this on purpose? Throwing me into this when my main character is about to suffer greatly. You're torturing the host. This is the task. The system's reply was still cold. I took a deep breath and stood up shakily. The mountain wind swept past, blowing my rough hemp robe, a chilling sensation piercing through my bones. Panic twisted around my heart like vines, almost suffocating me. But soon, a stronger thought overpowered the fear. Suin, calm down. You're not some talented hero. You're just a die-hard fan who's read the original work 12 times. But what of it? You know all the plot developments, you know who's sincere and who's fake, you know every turning point and the conspiracy hiding behind it. This is an advantage no one else has, you're only ace. This thought, like a glimmer of light, pierced through the gloom that shrouded my mind. It's just rewriting the plot, just saving the handsome and strong male protagonist. Let's do it! All right, I'll do it! I bit my lip, my fingers digging into my palm, pushing back the almost overwhelming panic. It's just saving Dragon Book, I accept it. What if I'm low on cultivation? The plot aura can protect those naive protagonists. Why can't it shield me, this destined fan? I suddenly looked up towards the sky, the wind sweeping away the mist, and I clenched my fists, the tips of my fingers turning pale from the effort. My voice carried a fierce determination. Rong Shu. Listen well, your #1 fan, Suin, is here. From today on, not a single hair on your head is allowed to fall out. As I finished speaking, a squirrel suddenly darted out from a pine tree beside me, its round, black eyes staring at me intently, the look almost as if it were watching a madman. I dejectedly pursed my lips. All right, I suppose I am a bit crazy. But right now, the primary challenge is not to save Rong Shu, it's to survive long enough to find him. A wandering swordsman, it sounds dignified, but in essence, it's a person without 3 things: no sect to protect, no allies to help, and no supplies to rely on. I desperately rummaged through the coarse, old robe on me, feeling around for a while before finally finding a flat pocket at the hem. Pulling it out, I nearly fainted on the spot. 2 dull, low-grade spirit stones, half a hard, almost tooth-jarring piece of dried bread, and a rusty dagger with a blade dull enough to be a pain to chop vegetables, let alone cut demons and evil spirits. Is this supposed to be sending a beggar away? I rolled my eyes at the air, unable to help but mutter under my breath. For the next day, I stumbled along the mountain path. The rough stone path ground my feet in pain, and several times my ankles were almost twisted. In my desperation, I almost put a colorful, poisonous mushroom in my mouth, lucky to have reacted quickly enough to avoid losing my life there. Occasionally, I met a few wandering cultivators along the way, and the looks they gave me were either scornful or disgusted, treating me almost like a beggar by the roadside. Well, it's not much different. As the sun set, I could no longer hold on, and I collapsed by a small stream. Without any concern for dignity, I rushed over, cupping the cool stream water in my hands and drinking it greedily, like a beast dying of thirst. The stream reflected my appearance, and I looked at the reflection, feeling a surge of nausea in my stomach. My face was pale as paper, my dark hair stuck in a mess on my forehead, and my coarse robe was dirty and wrinkled. No matter how I looked at it, it exuded a sense of destitution and desolation. A wandering cultivator? I think more like a wandering clown. I collapsed on the ground, weakly complaining to the system. Honestly, what do you see in me? I'm not a hero at all. I'm just a bookish geek who's obsessed with anti-heroes and only knows how to type. This time, the system's mechanical voice, for the first time, carried a subtle gentleness, no longer as cold and rigid as before. Because, when everyone fears him, hates him, and uses him, only you stand by him unconditionally, putting him first. I was startled, as if struck by something hard in my heart, and the dull, aching pain spread instantly. Yes, Rong Shu in the book has always been alone. The so-called righteous cultivators curse him as a demon. Those who pretend to approach him merely covet his power. No one has ever truly chosen him. Except for me, this insignificant fan from a different dimension. I suddenly clenched my fists, the knuckles turning pale from the effort, and my chest was surging with a fiery warmth. Yes, I said, one word at a time, my voice hoarse but resolute, I will be this person. Even if I'm shattered to pieces and die on the path of protecting him, I will accept it. I thought this was just a vow to the stars in the sky, but little did I know that the gears of fate turned so unexpectedly quickly. The final note of the vow had not yet faded when a loud, boastful shout, mixed with wild laughter, and the flickering flames of torches in the twilight, blurred my vision. I held my breath, crouched low, and silently moved towards the source of the sound. The moment I saw the scene, my heart stopped, and the blood seemed to solidify in my veins. In the middle of the empty mountain path, a thin little boy was surrounded by a group of well-dressed young men. His clothes were tattered and covered in dust, his body thin enough to be blown over by a breeze, but his eyes were astonishingly bright, sharp, stubborn, and cold, like a small beast driven to the brink of despair. It was him. I would never mistake that face, even in such a pitiful state. Rong Shu. My Rong Shu. My nose suddenly felt stuffy, and tears were almost about to burst out. The plot of the story was exactly the same as the original I was familiar with. This was the beginning of all the tragedy. It was here that the young Rong Shu was severely injured by these noble cultivators, and on the brink of death, he was saved by a passing evil cultivator, thus stepping into the darkness little by little. System, I whispered, my fingers trembling uncontrollably, my throat dry and sore. He almost died here. Correction, the mechanical voice was calm and almost cruel. Now is the best time for you to intervene. I swallowed hard, the sweat from my palms soaking through the rough fabric of my clothes. The rusty dagger in my pocket, which was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, seemed to weigh even more. But I still bit my teeth and trembled as I clenched it tightly. My gaze was fixed on that little boy. In the future, he would be a terrifying despot feared by all three realms, cold, ruthless, and solitary, with no one to rely on by his side. But tonight, it was different. From now on, he would no longer be alone. Absolutely not. If I had to describe my first mission in this world, it would be a mix of pain, foolishness, and even more pain, and I was extremely embarrassed. On the mountain path, 5 young men in rich robes were boasting about their prowess. The family crests embroidered on their robes were exquisite, and the cold light of their swords was chilling, but they wielded them carelessly, like toys. In the center of the circle, that tiny figure stood alone. Rong Shu's black hair was stuck to his pale cheeks with sweat and dust. His tattered sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing a thin but muscular arm. Even in the face of despair, his back remained as straight as an arrow. In his eyes, there was no crying, no pleading, only an icy stubbornness that stared fiercely at the perpetrator in front of him, the the jawline tense, enduring the curses thrown at him. Nothing but a discarded wild child. A youth in a yellow robe sneered, raising his hand and striking the handle of the sword against Long Shu's shoulder. A dull thud echoed, making my heart tremble. Long Shu stumbled back a step, hacking coughing a few times, but he clenched his teeth and did not let out a single sound of begging. "Look at how wimpy he is." Another youth in a blue robe laughed even more wildly. "He can't even fight back. What a?" The third youth was already impatient, grinning as he raised his sword, the sharp blade reflecting a cold glint in the flickering torchlight. "One slash and this slutty wild dog will know what kind of scum he is." My heart plummeted, a cold shiver racing up my spine. Now, if I didn't act now, it would be too late. Without a moment's thought, even without a second of hesitation, my body moved before my mind did. "Hey!" I roared, like a wild beast with no fear of death, charging straight towards the group. The rusted dagger in my palm was excruciatingly painful, and I could barely grip it, but I knew this thing was useless. "Get out of the way, you lot of spoiled brats." The 5 noble youths froze abruptly, their arrogance replaced by shock, as if they hadn't expected a hero to emerge out of nowhere. "Who are you?" I didn't answer, stumbled forward to Long Shu, my arms spread wide, forming a clumsy but resolute barrier, completely shielding the frail figure behind me. My voice trembled like leaves in the autumn wind, but I bit down hard, making each word sound as if I was pounding it with force. "Don't touch him with even a single finger." Behind me, I could feel Long Shu's stiffness. He didn't speak, but that piercing gaze, like a heated needle, pierced through my back, pierced into my flesh. The noble youths exchanged a glance, then erupted into laughter, the sarcasm like poisoned needles, piercing through densely. "Nothing but a roamer without a sect, and the lowest level chi condensation cultivator?" The youth in the yellow robe sneered, his eyes disdainful as he looked down on the mud beneath his feet. "You're not even worth the dust in my shoe seam." Before his words were finished, he charged at me, his sword slicing through the air with a piercing screech, heading straight for me. Too fast. Fast to the point that I couldn't react. Fast to the point that I didn't even have time to think about dodging. The sound of steel tearing through coarse cloth, mixed with the dull thud of flesh being sliced open, exploded in my ears. A searing pain swept through my body instantly, like a fierce fire had drilled into my chest, biting my internal organs. But I didn't fall. I held myself up, even reaching out to firmly protect the boy behind me, completely encircling him with my wings. My knees buckled uncontrollably, my bones trembling, but I bit down hard, not moving an inch. Pain. Too much pain. Pain so intense that my vision began to blur, black dots swirling in front of my eyes, as if dragging me into an endless abyss. But even as my consciousness began to fade, there was only one thought in my mind. He was still alive. He was safe. Since stepping into this eerie place, all that surged in my chest were panic and despair, but now, a strange warmth pressed over the pain, making me feel inexplicably grounded. I coughed violently, tears streaming down my face, blood foam dripping from the corner of my mouth, soaking through my coarse robe. I tried to turn my face slightly, using all my strength to give the boy behind me a smile, my voice so light it was like a whisper, "At least you're safe." I saw his eyes widen, the usually cold eyes brimming with emotions I couldn't understand. His small hand trembled slightly, as if he wanted to reach out to me, but I was already collapsing. My body went limp, the cold, hard ground hitting me with a bone-chilling chill. In the last second before I fell into darkness, the last thing I saw was Long Shu's shocked face. So small, so fragile, he shouldn't have to bear all the malice in the world. Then, everything reverted to nothingness. Death was far more painful than I had imagined. Those who say death is as peaceful as sleeping are all liars. It's more like being struck by lightning, every bone in your body shattering while countless shards of glass are violently inhaled, followed by someone setting fire to your insides, allowing you to slowly lose consciousness in the searing pain. The most ridiculous thing is, I didn't even have the qualifications to die properly. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer on that dusty mountain path, nor in that terrifyingly real novel world. I was floating in a chaotic space, neither black, nor white, nor gray, just pure nothingness, hollowing out my heart. My body was light and weightless, but the excruciating pain in my chest was real and terrifying. Instinctively, I raised my hand to where the sword had pierced me, where there was only smoothness, no wound, only a bone-deep, phantom-like pain that repeatedly tore at my nerves. I swallowed hard, my breathing still as urgent as after running 100 miles. So, This is the world after death? A cold, mechanical voice broke the silence without warning. Host has died. Initiating timeline reset program. I sat up abruptly. At least in this void, I could barely make this action. Reset? I raised my voice in disbelief, my throat hoarse as if it had been scraped with sandpaper. I clearly protected him. I took that slash for him. He wasn't hurt. How could this be a failure? Anger surged like lava in my chest, churning and boiling, almost bursting the bounds of reason. Correction, the system's voice remained calm and emotionless. The host and the target object, Rong Shu, have both fallen into a near-death state in Event 1. Although the target object has not been injured yet, the host's death has led to the inability to advance the subsequent tasks. Task assessment uncompleted. Reset initiated. I was completely frozen. It took me a while to find my voice again, laced with absurdity and anger. You mean, all my desperate sacrifices don't even count because I'm dead? You're **********, aren't you? I wildly waved my arms in the void, trembling with anger, nearly rolling over in this weightless space. Narrative? Continuity? What the hell do these bullshit things have to do with me? I've bled for him, sustained fatal injuries. Do you know how much it hurt? I swallowed the bloody taste in my mouth, just to protect him, and now you tell me it's a failure? The system completely ignored my rage, its tone as steady as a stone. Warning, host's emotional state is unstable. Suggest to quickly accept task parameters and prepare for restart. Unstable? Of course I'm unstable. I roared almost as if I were possessed. I just got stabbed to death by a 13-year-old brat relying on his parents' power. Who the hell can stay stable after that? I helplessly covered my face, a despairing wail escaping my throat. It's absurd. I even died without meeting the standards. You're treating me like a failed exam, aren't you? The space fell into silence, only the sound of my heavy breathing echoing repeatedly in this void. After a long time, I slowly lowered my hand. My fingertips still trembled, but beneath the anger, something was slowly coalescing, warming up, hard and fiery. No, I can't give up. Because I saw Rong Shu's expression at the time. I saw the fleeting shock in his eyes when I rushed over. I saw his eyes widen dramatically when I blocked his blade. I saw his hand twitch slightly when I fell, the gesture of reaching out, yet controlled. He was not a naturally cold-blooded monster, nor was he an existence destined to be consumed by darkness. He was just a boy who had never been firmly chosen by anyone. Until I appeared. Even though this choice hurt me to the bone, made me die in a mess, I accepted it. I clenched my fists suddenly, my eyes igniting with a spark of fire. System, listen to me. You want me to live while also protecting Rong Shu, right? I enunciated each word, my voice hoarse yet resolute. Okay, I agree. I will try to do it. But I will never just watch him suffer or be bullied by those people because of your *****king rules. The mechanical sound of the system hummed slightly, as if affected by my emotional fluctuations. Confirmed host's will. Emotional state meets the requirements for task advancement. Reinitialize narrative access point. A glowing text panel suddenly appeared in front of me. Words were scrolling rapidly, so fast that it was dazzling, and I could only catch a few key pieces of information. Next key event, attempted kidnapping. Location, border village. Perpetrators, human trafficker gang. Timeline, target object Rong Shu, age about 9. I furrowed my brow, my throat starting to dry again. 9 years old, human traffickers. I remembered this part of the plot. It was another unforgettable shadow in Rong Shu's childhood. Being abducted by human traffickers, being sold around, enduring torture, it was also one of the turning points that made him completely lose faith in humanity. So, someone is going to kidnap him next? I asked solemnly. Definitely, the system gave a clear answer. This task's objective, prevent the target object from being captured or avoid substantial harm to him. And I can't die again, can I? I added, a hint of self-mockery in my tone. Correct. The host's death will directly trigger a second reset. Ah, that's great. I twisted my lips, managing a smile that was more like a cry, no pressure at all. I helplessly collapsed in the void, like a deflated ball, kicking frantically in this empty space, like a child throwing a tantrum in an empty bathtub. Do you know what's the worst? I murmured to the air, my voice filled with helplessness. I haven't even figured out how to live properly in this *****king world, and now I have to go fight a group of ruthless human traffickers. I haven't even learned how to die heroically. What a wimp I am. No coolness at all. let alone leaving behind a heroic reputation. No one would remember this cultivator who tried to stop the strike, only a fool who was easily pierced like a skewer. The system is cruel. Accuracy rate 87%. I shot up suddenly, the fury in my eyes piercing the invisible source. This was not a question, but a stark mockery. Silence once again engulfed, suffocating. The dull pain in my chest was spreading, not just the lingering pain from the illusion, but also an overwhelming sense of guilt. I had thought that saving him once was enough, but the cruelty of this world was far beyond my imagination. Even though I blocked that fatal stab for him, the sword of fate still hung in the dark. Only sacrifice could not protect Rong Shu. I had to find another way. Gently, I straightened my back in the void. My body was still trembling uncontrollably, but my voice was unexpectedly steady, enunciating each word. Okay, reset me. Send me back. I will keep trying until I get it right. The system's response was instantaneous. Confirmed. Restarting timeline. Host. Communication transfer will be initiated in 3 seconds. In an instant, the void burst into a tearing white light. My chest tightened abruptly, my breathing rapid and urgent as if about to explode. I clenched my fist, ready to face everything. This time, I would not die in vain. I would find a way to live alongside him. The second journey. Dealer. The world is reconstructed in the stench of dust and blood in the mouth. I stagger forward and take a half step, pressing my chest firmly. There is no wound, only the ghost of the last death haunting me, my fingertips numb, my knees weak, barely able to support my body. I take a deep breath of the earthy air, forcing myself to concentrate. Suin, be awake. This is the second round, no more impulsive assassinations. The cold reminder of the system echoes in my mind. Next key event, kidnapping attempt. Location, border village. My stomach tightens abruptly, a chill running up my spine. This time, the dragon book will be younger. Perhaps 8, perhaps 9 years old. Alone, fragile as a withered leaf in the wind. Fate seems to be throwing this nightmare of a dealer at such a small child. The village I descend into is decrepit and shocking. The crooked earth houses lean to one side, the muddy streets reflecting a cold, damp light in the darkness, a few faint flames flickering between the houses, like the breath of the dying. The villagers move silently like shadows, either avoiding my gaze or numbly heading their way, too hungry, too afraid, not daring to glance at a stranger. I search frantically through the village, paying no attention to the vigilant eyes cast my way, murmuring over and over in my mouth. Where is he? Where is the dragon book? Just then, I see him. A small boy, thin as a stick, wearing a patchwork gray cloth robe, his wild hair tied loosely with a thick rope, his head bowed low, stepping forward one step at a time. His pace is not light, but it carries a determination that is not in keeping with his age, yet those slightly hunched shoulders, the tense jawline, hide a trace of an unshakable weight, seemingly already ground down by the malice of the world. No longer expecting any kindness to descend upon him. Dragon book. My throat tightens suddenly, as if gripped by an invisible hand. He is smaller than I remember, his cheeks sunken deeply from extreme hunger, his jawline sharp and almost cruel, yet those eyes that should be filled with the innocence of a child, are still astonishingly bright, cold like steel hidden in the shadows, tempered with uneroded sharpness. Time seems to freeze in this moment. I stand still, forgetting to breathe, until the shadow following him slowly dissipates. 3 men, like wolves biding their time, approach. Their smiles fake and sickening. I snap back to reality, my heart pounding wildly in my chest, pounding against my ribs. Caught you, kid. The man in front, with a sinister grin, stretches out his hand, his fingers about to touch the slender arm of Dragon Book. There is no time to think. I rush out like an arrow from a bow. Let him go. The knife in my hand awkwardly slices through the air, reflecting a faint light. I stand firmly in front of Dragon Book, completely shielding the fragile figure behind me. The boy's pupils contract abruptly, a wave of disbelief surging as he recognizes me. It's you! I have no time to respond. A heavy punch hits my abdomen, a sharp pain sweeping through my entire body. Like a drum being struck, my internal organs dislocated. I groan, my body uncontrollably staggering forward, but with a fierce will, I manage to steady myself, not falling to my knees. The other dealer's eyes flash with malice. He suddenly pulls out the knife from his waist, the cold light chilling. Mind your own business, fool. Get out of here. This kid is 10 times more valuable than your sorry life. My throat is dry and painful, but I force myself to open my mouth, my voice hoarse but determined. If you're going to harm him, you have to get past me first. Perhaps I was just taking advantage of the situation, making the gears of fate turn more smoothly. The blade slices through the air, the first cut scraping across my shoulder, the sound of fabric tearing accompanied by a burning pain, blood oozing out instantly. The second cut stabs into my side without warning, the sharp pain spreading like wildfire throughout my body, hot and burning blood flowing down the handle of the knife. I bite down hard, holding back the cry that rises to my lips, only a suppressed groan escaping from my throat. I grab Dragon Book's icy wrist with my other hand, his skin thin enough to feel the prominent knuckles below. Run. His small hand trembles fiercely in my palm, but he seems to be rooted to the spot, not moving an inch. Run fast. I roar, not having time to argue with him, pulling his wrist and staggering into the depths of the alley. Behind me, the angry shouts of the dealers come, their heavy footsteps like drums chasing after us, pressing us closer. Blood drops from my wounds, hitting the gray soil, blooming into dark brown flowers. My vision begins to blur, the images before me overlapping, but I dare not relax, holding Dragon Book's hand tightly, forcing my already weak legs to keep moving. Finally, we reach the edge of the village. A half-collapsed earthen wall stands crookedly, a crack only wide enough for one person to pass through. My strength is rapidly draining away from the wound, every breath pulling on the pain in my internal organs. Go this way. Don't look back. I gasp, using the last of my strength to push him towards the crack. But Dragon Book stops. Those cold eyes of his seem to ignite with a spark, burning holes into me. Why are you doing this? Because no one has ever done this for me before. I weakly smile, tasting the iron taste of blood on my tongue. Suddenly, a sharp pain erupts from behind, a knife piercing into my back. The immense force pushes me forward, my knees hitting the ground with a dull thud. I cough violently, warm liquid spilling from my mouth, staining the soil in front of me. My vision is instantly overwhelmed by white light, but I still hold onto Dragon Book's hand, as if gripping the last straw of life. Go. Don't look back, I whisper, my voice as light as a wisp of smoke. But he still looks back. Fell heavily to the ground, inertia dragging him down with me. Rong Shu immediately twisted his body to get up, using his thin arms, fragile as if they would break at a touch, to desperately try to pull me up. The peddlers chased close, but hesitated, muttering ear-splitting curses. One spat on the ground, impatiently saying, "What a goddamn nuisance." "Never mind. Let them go." One half dead and a kid with no money, not worth wasting time. Their footsteps gradually faded away, finally disappearing into the wind at the end of the alley. The world fell completely silent. Lying on the cold earth, my blood kept oozing out, wetting the clothes on my back and side waist, and also soaking the ground beneath me. Rong Shu's small hand gently pressed on my wound, his movements clumsy yet with a careful, loving care, as if this could stop the bleeding. His face was pale as paper, his lips trembling continuously, but those once cold eyes were now wide open, swirling with shock, worry, and a kind of fiery emotion I had never seen before. "Why?" His voice was hoarse, thick with a stuffy nose. "Why did you do this for me?" "Because I also want to be worth a moment of freedom." I struggled to lift my hand, using the bloodied fingertips to gently wipe away the tears that had seeped out of his eyes. My vision grew increasingly blurred, and Rong Shu's face before me began to overlap and fade. "Hey, don't cry," I gasped weakly. "You look better when you're not crying." He tightly held my hand, the strength unlike that of a frail child. "Shut up. Don't fall asleep. Keep your eyes open." "But I'm so tired." "Rong Shu, let me be a good child." "Okay." I heard my voice as light as a wisp of smoke. The darkness surged back, engulfing me completely. Yet, his voice pierced through the void, echoing over and over, with a broken ending, suffocatingly entwined. "Do you think the second death would be easier?" "No. The first death was a cruel pain of flesh and skin being torn apart, but the second was a heart-wrenching pain that shattered every organ." The phantom wound still ached, but compared to this pain, that call was like a dull knife, repeatedly cutting into my already torn and tattered heart. Raw, with a sobbing tone, it kept calling out, begging me not to close my eyes. I died in his arms. Scariest than being stabbed through the chest was his gaze. It was as if, in his brief and wretched half-life, he had finally been chosen by someone, only to be shattered before his eyes. The void once again enveloped me, cold and piercing, boundless, with unadulterated cruelty. I groaned, pressing my fingertips hard against my chest, as if this could stop the spreading chill. The cold, emotionless voice of the system rang out in my mind on time, like a piece of ice falling into boiling blood. Host has died. Timeline reset initiated. I pulled a corner of my mouth, laughing, the sound raspy as if scraped with sandpaper. Not even a 5-minute mourning period? How efficient. Optimal efficiency principle. Suggest immediate restart of task. Okay, it's fine. I took a deep breath. The turmoil in my chest no longer despair but a burning anger. Send me back. But this time, I wiped away the moisture from the corner of my eye with the back of my hand, my fingertips pale from the force. This time, my voice was steady without a tremor. I will never die in front of him again. A blinding flash of light erupted, blinding me. When I opened my eyes again, the familiar scent had enveloped me, the freshness of pine mixed with the moisture of the earth, the quiet forests surrounding me, sunlight filtering through the tall trees, casting patchy shadows, and the distant sound of several clear bird calls. And he was there, Rong Shu. This time, he was not curled up in a corner, injured and wounded, but squatting by the riverbank, holding a smooth wooden stick in his hand, awkwardly poking at the water as if fishing. His clothes were torn in several places, the edges worn and frayed, and his shoes were on the verge of falling apart, exposing toes covered in mud. Yet, his profile was calmer than I remembered at any time, without the later coldness and bitterness, only the innocence of a youth. I took a step forward, my heart beat so fast it felt like it would shatter my ribs. Rong Shu. He looked up abruptly, his gaze directly into my eyes. I froze in place, my blood as if solidified. His eyes were not the empty, numb, lifeless gaze I remembered. There was something in them, a search, a confusion, as if looking at someone both strange and familiar, as if he knew me. I forced a smile that I usually wore, trying to hide the storm raging in my heart. What? Stunned to see such a handsome breeder passing by? He frowned, his thin eyebrows furrowing into a small knot, and slowly straightened up. He gripped the wooden stick even tighter with his slender hand, his knuckles turning white. It's you, you're back again. My heartbeat skipped a beat, my voice trembling. Do you remember me? He tilted his head, his dark, grape-like eyes staring at me for a long time, until I almost thought he wouldn't answer. When I finally heard his soft, clear voice, I've seen you in my dreams. These 7 words were like a blade of ice, piercing my heart instantly. It turned out that to him, those unforgettable deaths and farewells were just a blurred dream. Perhaps just fragmented images, a person standing in front of him, covered in blood, dragging him through the mud, and finally laughing, calling his name with a weak breath. But even so, he still remembered. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, the cold warning sound of the system exploded like an alarm in my mind. Warning: the subject's consciousness has abnormally intensified, and there is an extremely high risk of narrative stability. My blood turned cold instantly, and I bit my tongue to question inwardly. What does that mean? Risk? He was just saying he dreamed of me. Detected timeline reset deviation. The subject retains memories across reset cycles. Suggest the host to be cautious and avoid further interference. I clutched my fists tightly, the nails digging deeply into the palm, the pain keeping me awake. Damned. What do you want me to do? Pretend I don't know him? Ignore him as a stranger? There was no answer, only a silence. That was the style of the system, always only issuing warnings but never providing solutions. Rong Shu slowly approached a few steps towards me, his eyes slightly squinting. He was still young, thin and fragile as if a gust of wind could knock him over, but he already had that unique temperament, calm on the surface like a deep pool, but underneath hiding sharp edges, with a cold, unwelcoming demeanor. You're strange, he said, his voice thin but firm, like you don't belong here. He paused, and his voice softened slightly, with a hint of his own unperceived confusion, but it also feels familiar. I rolled my Adam's apple, my throat tight and painful. I wanted to tell him everything, to tell him that I had seen him grow up, seen him become the tyrant in the eyes of the world, and yet, I still felt he was more worthy of love than those heroic figures with sanctimonious faces, to tell him that he shouldn't be ground down by this cruel world, shouldn't step by step fall into darkness. But I couldn't say. I knew that if I dared to utter a single word, the system might instantly make me disappear in an even more cruel way. So I crouched down, trying to make my voice sound gentle, and raised a smile that he might have seen in a dream. Maybe we've met somewhere else. It's all in the past. not important. What was important was, this time, I would protect you. The last sentence I swallowed, turning it into an invisible vow. We stood silently like that, the sunlight falling on his hair, casting a warm golden edge. He stared at me, his gaze so focused it seemed as if he wanted to etch my image into his bones, trying to unravel all hidden truths from my expression. I met his gaze, silently challenging the system. Come on, have the courage to stop me. After a long time, Rong Shu finally turned around, sitting back down by the riverbank, his back to me, leaving only a slim silhouette. If you lie, I will know, he said. I softly laughed, the feeling of release spreading through me like warm water. Fair, I said, but I speak the truth. You will see. The system in my mind emitted a faint buzzing, as if protesting, or issuing a new warning. I was too lazy to pay attention, because just as he turned around, I clearly saw, in the cold, deep sea of his eyes, a fleeting trace of not only suspicion, but also a very faint, yet truly existing, warmth. If this thread of memory could pierce through the barriers of world resets, perhaps, just perhaps, I could rewrite all tragic endings. If there is anything that the years of struggling in this cursed novel world has taught me, it is that every seemingly peaceful moment is merely a brief pause before fate raises its sword again. But that night by the river, I deliberately forgot this truth. The flame flickered weakly, the orange glow shivering in the cold wind, barely opening a small warm barrier in the dark forest, but unable to drive away the surrounding bone-chilling cold. I squatted by the fire, carefully adding a few pieces of half-dry branches, the sparks crackling like mocking my meager survival skills. In the end, nothing more than the scraps I pieced together from wild survival posts I found online. Luo Chu sat opposite me, still that silent and uncommunicative demeanor. He wrapped his arms around his knees, his chin resting on them, his deep eyes reflecting the flickering firelight, like containing two clusters of quiet stars. Hey! Have you ever grilled fish before? I used a thin stick to stir the fire, breaking the silence. He blinked, his dark lashes casting a small shadow under his eyelids, his eyes showing a hint of unperceived suspicion, directly looking at me. Here, fish. I held up the trophy in my hand, two emaciated river fish, their scales still glistening with wetness. To catch them, I almost fell into the cold river 3 times, and my pants were still dripping with water. These 2 fish were far from plump, even somewhat pitiful, but compared to the bitter tree bark I had to chew a few days ago, they were heaven and earth apart. His lips moved slightly, not a smile, more like he was startled by my foolishness. You're too noisy, he said, his voice clear and crisp, but without any warmth. That's charm, little brat, I smiled carelessly, picking up a thick branch and skewering the fish on it. Besides, if you stay silent all day, you might end up with wrinkles on your face before you've even grown up, turning into a little old man. He said nothing more, nor did he turn around, just watched me awkwardly turning the branch. I was secretly pleased, as this was already a big progress. After that, we shared this simple dinner in silence. The fish was tasteless, the edges burned to a bitter black, but still carrying a bit of raw fishiness. Yet Luo Chu ate it with great seriousness, chewing each bite carefully, without a word of complaint, as if enjoying some gourmet dish. I also followed suit, humming a tuneless tune, turning the branch while indulging in self-satisfaction, like a chef in a 5-star restaurant. By the end of the meal, the fire was almost out, only a few remnants of fire struggling in the ashes. He looked at me under the faint light, his voice light as a breeze, with a cautious attempt. You make me feel familiar. This sentence felt like a needle, piercing my softest spot. My throat tightened, and I forced a relaxed smile. Right? I've said it before, we knew each other in a past life. He obviously didn't believe this absurd claim, furrowing his brows, his eyes filled with doubt, but didn't press any further. After a while, his eyelids grew heavy, fatigue overwhelming him like a tide, and he finally closed his eyes, sinking into sleep. I silently watched him sleeping, the fatigue and alertness that usually surrounded his face finally vanished, leaving only the innocence and fragility unique to a young boy. The moonlight on his slender cheeks, outlining a soft contour, making him no more than an ordinary boy dreaming sweet dreams under the stars. I solemnly swear in my heart again, no matter how many dangers I have to face in the future, I will protect this fragile little one, and never let him fall into the pitfalls of the original story. The next day passed unusually calmly, so calm that it was almost unsettling. We walked side by side through the dense forest, sunlight filtering through layers of leaves, casting patchy shadows on the ground. I taught him to use stones as throwing weapons, practicing on the tree trunks. He learned quickly, hitting the target accurately every time. He taught me how to distinguish the rustle of the wind and grass, and how to find water sources by following the faint sound of running water. I always accidentally stumbled over the roots under my feet, so many times that I was even ashamed to admit it. Every time I stumbled to my feet, I could see him frowning at me, his eyes as if saying, "How could such a clumsy person have survived until now?" Once, I brushed off the dirt on my body, deliberately making a joke to him. "Look, how good it is to have me around. You don't even need to join a sect. I provide free food, free comedy shows, and even free protection. How convenient." He emitted a light snort from his nose, muttering, "More like free trouble." There was no real reprimand in his tone. I couldn't help but laugh, ignoring the disdainful look he gave me, and reached out to rub his soft hair. "All right, then I'm your personal trouble." His eyes flickered, and the slightly impatient look in them softened slightly. That night, we camped in the forest again. The night was quiet, the moonlight like water, filtering through the gaps between the branches, weaving a gentle net on the ground. At that moment, I almost forgot that I was in danger, that this was a cursed world that could reset at any moment, and a sense of warmth long forgotten surged up in my heart, almost making me feel that such days were already beautiful enough. However, I had underestimated the cruelty of fate. The next night, it finally remembered this escapee. The attack came without warning, so fast that it was impossible to react. At that moment, we were dozing by the embers of the fire, half asleep and half awake, when a loud rumble echoed, like thunder crashing in our ears, shaking the ground violently. Then, countless dark figures rushed out from the shadows of the forest, massive in size, emanating a chilling sense of killing intent. They were the ferocious spirit beasts. Almost instantaneously, Luo Chu's eyes snapped open, and his original drowsiness vanished. He flipped his wrist, and the long spear that had accompanied him was securely in his hand, his eyes instantly becoming as sharp as a knife. Firmly locked on the darkness ahead, the dagger was drawn, its cold light reflecting on my pale face. I was more aware than anyone else that this inch-long blade was no match for the giant beast. It was just a fragile toothpick. The Adam's apple in my throat rolled fiercely, swallowing the bitter saliva. It was me who had dragged us into this predicament, wasn't it? He didn't look at me, his amber-colored pupils locked on the ferocious beast, his voice cold as ice. "Follow me." I nearly snorted with laughter. What a naive idea. How could I possibly let a half-grown child act as my bodyguard? The roar was so loud it hurt my eardrums, and the giant beast surged forward, the stench of death wrapping around us like a shroud. We instantly scattered, rolling helplessly in opposite directions. As the claws landed, the stones flew, and the place where we had stood was torn open into 3 deep gashes visible to the bone, the soil and roots falling down in a clatter. Luo Chu's attacks were astonishingly fast and accurate. For a boy of his age, it was almost unfathomable talent. But the spear only left a shallow blood mark on the thick fur of the beast, as if scratching an itch. The ferocious roar echoed through the forest, and the giant beast swung its massive paw straight at Luo Chu. My blood instantly solidified, my heart squeezing tightly as if gripped by an invisible hand, almost bursting out of my chest. If that paw hit him, he would surely die. "No!" I roared, giving everything I had to run wildly, crashing into Luo Chu just before the paw landed. The heavy thud echoed in my ears, the paw crashing down solidly on my back. The world was instantly dyed scarlet, the crisp sound of broken bones clearly audible, like withered branches being stepped on brutally. My lungs suddenly contracted, the pain like a tsunami sweeping over me, overwhelming my consciousness, swallowing all sounds. I fell heavily to the ground, using the last bit of strength to push Luo Chu further away. "Swan!" He screamed my name in a heart-wrenching manner, my real name. He didn't even realize that he had blurted it out. My vision gradually blurred, like covered with a thick mist. I saw him struggling to crawl towards me, his hands trembling so violently that he even tried to push the beast away with his thin body. His face was twisted with extreme anger and fear, emotions that were not of this age, primitive and overwhelming. Why? Why again? His voice was broken and laced with sobs. I forced a smile, the blood gushing from the corner of my mouth, dripping onto the cold earth. "Because I said I wouldn't let you get hurt." The beast roared again, raising its massive paw high, casting a complete shadow over me. My vision grew darker and darker, my body feeling as heavy as if filled with lead, unable to move even a finger. I last looked into Luo Chu's eyes, silently screaming in my heart, don't forget me, then, an endless darkness engulfed me completely. Fate's cracks. Died under the paw of a giant spirit beast. Well, it's not fun at all. Highly not recommended. When I opened my eyes again, nothingness, like an uninvited old friend, enveloped me with its bone-chilling coldness. It's the kind of friend who would drink all the beer in your fridge and then turn a blind eye to your plight. Cold, endless, and silent were the only melodies here. The only thing that followed me here was the ghostly weight of the giant paw embedded in my ribs, the crisp sound of bones breaking like withered branches, and Luo Chu's exhausted cry. My name, he called like the wail of a dying warhorse. Damn, how could I still hear it? I curled up in the void, even though the wounds had long healed, my hands still uncontrollably pressing on my chest. This was the third time. The first was persecution by the nobility, the second was falling into the hands of human traffickers, and now, dying under the paw of a beast. I had obviously changed everything. The scars on him, the nightmares that kept him awake at night, the bloody memories that twisted his entire childhood. I had intervened in all of them. I had bled for him, even dying for him time and again. But why? Why did things seem to be getting worse instead? The system's voice pierced through my chaotic thoughts, as cold as the blade falling from the guillotine, without a trace of warmth. Host is dead. Timeline reset. I pulled at the corner of my mouth, emitting a hoarse, bitter laugh. Oh, stop using that cold, indifferent tone. At least pretend to show a bit of concern. Can't you? I had been turned into swan brand minced meat, and still received this tone. There was no response. I sat up abruptly, my teeth clacking. All right, you're ruthless. Give me the data. Tell me the results of this time. Tell me, is he safe now? What I got in response was an even deeper silence. My heart sank little by little. System. Its voice rang out again, flat and almost cruel. The black value is still rising. No. I shook my head fiercely, my head buzzing. You're wrong. I clearly stopped all the tragedies. He didn't bleed to death in the alley, he wasn't sold by human traffickers, and he didn't die alone in this forest. I repaired everything. Correction. Due to host intervention, the subject has suffered a major injury event, but the deviation value of fate is insufficient. I let out a sharp, trembling laugh, tears overflowing uncontrollably. Insufficient? What does that mean? Do you want me to die even more brutally this time? More dramatically? Should I scream louder to add some dramatic effect for you? The system continued to ignore my questions. Causality correction program initiated. The black value trajectory continues to rise. A sudden crack opened in a place deep in my heart. The pain spreading out. I lost my balance and fell to my knees in the void, my hands clutching my hair fiercely. What do I have to do? How can I fight this cursed fate? How can I break free from this godlike script that aims to push him into the abyss? My voice echoed in the void, hollow like coming from another world, but never received any response. Memories surged in like a tidal wave. The stubborn look in the boy's eyes as he glared at me, his uncomplaining expression as he ate the charred fish I cooked, the warmth in his voice when he softly said, "I feel like I know you," and finally, his heart-wrenching scream of swan and his desperate expression. Lying under the paw of the giant beast, my body shattered as he called out my name. Even if the timeline resets, a part of his soul still firmly remembers me. How could such a bond make his black value rise instead? A tight squeeze in my chest. I opened my throat hoarsely again. Those key tragic moments of his should have been endured alone. I intervened. Wasn't that helping him? Wrong. The causality is complex, and the analysis result is inapplicable. Don't hide from me, I shouted louder, almost screaming. What do you know, anyway? It remains silent. I collapse exhausted to the ground, the overwhelming anger gradually burning to ashes, leaving only an obstinate determination that grows wildly in my heart. Good. Very good. It doesn't matter that you didn't tell me the truth. But listen to me, you cold, metallic canister. I don't care about the rising black value, nor do I care if the destiny you speak of is etched in stone. As long as I'm here, as long as I have a breath left, I will continue to fight this destiny to the end. Even if I have to die 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, I will never give up. I take a trembling breath, the cold air filling my lungs, yet it makes me more awake. The void remains silent, as if silently mocking my own overconfidence. I smiled bitterly. Yes, of course you wouldn't understand. After all, it's not you who's bleeding, nor you who's suffering, right? Just then, a faint glimmer appeared in the distance. It was the door to the next timeline. The bones in my body seemed to start aching again, the phantom pain left by death, sharp and clear. My spirit was torn in two, every inch crying out with exhaustion. But I still struggled to stand up. If I give up now, Luo Chu's fate will be irrevocably nailed to darkness. I could never let the boy I fought so hard to protect, the beautiful yet cold, who will eventually become a generation's overlord, become just a heartless monster because of this cursed universe's arrangement. All right, the fourth round, I muttered softly, straightening my spine slowly, the flames of defiance swirling in my eyes. I want to see what kind of hell you're going to throw me into this time. The light surged instantly, engulfing my figure. Chapter 9, The Fourth Journey, The Growth Trajectory of the Antagonist. There is nothing more disorienting than being reborn from the dead. Living. The last remaining memory is a bone-chilling pain, the sharp claws of beasts tearing through my body, followed by the hollow void of consciousness separation, then the howling wind, the scorching heat waves, and a suffocating, heavy silence. I stumbled to steady myself, blinking hard to dispel the dizziness. The boots I kicked were not on muddy ground, but on smooth, cold marble. Marble? When did my random landing always bring me down to such luxurious floors? I hadn't had time to take a detailed look at the grand hall around me when a dangerous warning pierced my instincts like an icicle. The black dragon pillars rose from the ground, the carved beams wrapped in silver patterns, and the eerie green fire jumped in the torches, flickeringly reflecting on the vast hall. Danger! I almost screamed, a chilling frost that seeped into my bones. Just then, a voice echoed. Deep, smooth, like poison silk, each note wrapped in an unbreakable threat. Yes, look who finally decided to show up. I stiffened, just like the foolish protagonist in a horror movie who knows it's wrong but can't help but turn back. Slowly, inch by inch, I turned around, looking up. It was Luo Enki, but he was not the Luo Enki of my memory. Not the half-starved, timid child by the river, not the boy who gnawed at the fish I burned, with a tired look in his eyes, nor the awkward figure who tightly held my hand in the face of despair, trembling all over. The man before me was tall, sharp, and beautiful like a drawn sword. The dark robe whispered with his movements, the silver-threaded hidden patterns flowing with cold light in the green fire, outlining his figure even more proudly. His long hair fell, outlining a face that was too perfect yet carried a chilling cruelty. Those eyes were a stormy night, surging with a controlling anger, the master of the book, the natural villain, the nightmare of all readers, and the hopelessly loved destination for me. My little guy has finally grown up, and right now, he's staring at me with the eyes of a man who views his prey. I hadn't even had time to mutter a clumsy greeting, like, "Hey, it's been a long time, maybe we can barbecue some fish again," when he moved. A moment ago, he was at the other end of the hall, far away. The next moment, he was right in front of me, too fast for even a blink. My back slammed into the cold stone pillar, the pain was severe, and I couldn't help but groan. One hand of his supported the stone pillar above my head, forming an impenetrable restraint, while the other hand firmly held my chin, the knuckles white. His body was so close, the cold breath with a chilling aura gently sweeping over my earlobe. Thought I wouldn't notice? His voice was like steel wrapped in velvet, deep and oppressive. Every time I reach out to you, you vanish into thin air. Every time you die in front of me, I lose something. Then you come back, time and time again, like a ghost that can't be shaken off. I couldn't help but tremble. My mind was torn between two thoughts, almost short-circuiting. One was, my goodness, how can he be so attractive? And the other was, it's over, I'm really going to die this time. I struggled to pull a smile from my mouth, trying to create a more relaxed atmosphere, but the only response was silence. The pressure on my chin tightened abruptly. Not painful, but enough to make me clearly realize that as long as he wanted, he could easily break my neck. Those deep, cold eyes pierced my pupils, as if to see through my soul. You dare die again, he whispered word by word, each word like ice, slow and dangerous. I will let the whole world accompany you into the grave. My heart stopped abruptly. The threat was terrifying, but it was not the source of my suffocation. The real reason for my heart palpitations was his tone. Not like a high-handed villain, not like a controller of everything, but rather like a despairing person on the edge of a cliff, struggling desperately. I swallowed a dry saliva, mustering all my courage, and asked in a hoarse voice, "Luo Enki, do you remember me?" Damn! He didn't answer. His thumb almost casually rubbed my chin, the action carrying a strange tenderness, but his eyes never softened. You've been clinging to me, he continued, his voice as cold as ice, your face, your voice, your blood. Even if you die, I can't forget. Tell me, Suan, Who are you really? The last few words fell, and my stomach shrank sharply. He remembered. Even after countless resets, he still remembered. In my mind, the system's warning sound echoed sharply. Enhanced consciousness anchoring, narrative stability on the brink of collapse. Humph. No surprise. This so-called narrative stability had long been shattered to pieces. I forced a smile, sarcasm being the only shield I could grasp at the moment. Who am I? Well, professional human shield, full-time dummy, plus part-time barbecue fish master. That's all. His eyes narrowed dangerously, but in that instant, I caught a flash of the shadow of the boy beneath the mask. The boy who silently gnawed at the burned fish I made, the boy who said nothing, the boy who shouted my name wildly after I died, the boy who shouldn't have been pushed into such a desperate situation by fate. I took a trembling breath, my voice even I didn't notice a hint of hoarseness. Luo Enki, I promise to protect you. He stiffened all over, and the cold mask on his face relaxed for half a second. But in the next second, the relaxation disappeared without a trace, as fast as an illusion. He raised his lips, revealing a cold sneer. Protect me? Foolish. I don't need your protection. What I want is for you to stop leaving me. His voice was lower and darker, like something squeezed out from the depths of his throat, carrying extreme oppression and pain. My throat tightened, and my heart raced wildly. I didn't know what to say, nor did I know what to say to avoid being judged as a violation, or directly erased by the system. But I was clear about one thing. The boy I fought so hard to save had grown into the villain I deeply loved. And this time, he wouldn't let me slip away again. I've never been someone who hasn't been pressed against a wall before. Most of the time, it was in crowded corridors, pushed and bumped by overexcited classmates, or in wrestling matches with my cousin, being firmly held against the wall to surrender. But none of those experiences had prepared me to deal with the suffocating feeling brought by Luo Enki. His actions were not clumsy, nor were they arbitrary. Every pose, every bit of force, carried precise intention, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years, and had practiced everything to perfection. And I was his carefully prepared prey. Once caught in his hands, there was no possibility of escape. The cold stone pillar against my back was piercingly cold, the chill seeping through my thin clothes, numbing my skin. The hand supporting the stone pillar above my head, the fingers resting casually on the pillar, carried an unstoppable power, the other hand holding my chin, forcing me to look up, making me have to meet his eyes. I was immobile, even my breathing became difficult. Luo Enki's gaze was firmly locked on my eyes, not the fearful and cautious eyes of the child by the river, not the terrified eyes of the boy in the forest, but the eyes of the owner. Sharp, cold, resolute, but in the stormy depth, I caught something more terrifying and more fragile: possession. His breath weighed heavily on me, bringing with it a sense of impending pressure like a mountain rain. I had read countless times about overpowering aura in the novel The Crow, but it was only through personal experience that I realized words are ultimately pale. My knees trembled uncontrollably, my lungs felt as if they were blocked by something, even breathing was painful. Every instinct was screaming, urging me to bow my head, surrender, and do everything possible to survive. Yet, in my mind, there was only one absurd thought swirling: madness. My goodness, my little one has grown into such a passionate and villainous scoundrel. Of course, I dared not say this aloud. Instead, my mouth opened of its own accord, with a hint of unintentional panic in my tone. Hey, isn't this a bit too close? We skipped over the development arcs of 3 characters? My words were interrupted by his voice. Deep, dangerous, each syllable seemed to have been forged by countless blows, carrying an unwavering certainty. Too close? I don't think so. He increased the pressure on my chin, his thumb gently tracing the edge of my chin, causing a shiver. The action was tender, contrasting with the coldness in his eyes, making my heartbeat skip a beat. Warm breath wrapped around my ear, and time seemed to be grasped by an invisible hand, suddenly stopping. Every nerve in my body was screaming, every inch of skin was tense due to the closeness. I swallowed hard, opened my mouth, and my voice was broken like torn paper. Are you waiting for me? His eyes narrowed abruptly, the black pupils swirling with sharp light, and every word seemed like a thunderclap piercing the heart. Yes. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine, the coldness in his breath mixed with passionate emotions, making my skin tremble. In a daze, the bitterness of ash spread over my tongue, the sensation of your blood freezing in my palm, your last smile and breath, all surged forward like a tide. I couldn't shake them off. Every time I reached out to grab them, you shattered and disappeared in my fingertips, again and again, torturing my nerves repeatedly. His expression twisted abruptly, the cold, hard lines sharp like a knife. My chest tightened suddenly, and a sense of suffocation instantly gripped me. God, he was not just angry. The turmoil in his eyes was the despair of a drowning man. The system in my mind buzzed weakly, the red warning window flashing at the edge of my consciousness. Warning. Consciousness load has reached its peak, narrative framework is about to collapse. I directly ignored it. At this moment, the man in front of me was on the verge of collapse. Rong Shu, your tone sounds like you're bothering me. My voice trembled uncontrollably, and I managed to force a smile. You are. His voice was rough like sandpaper, and between the words was a dull pain like a knife cut. Suin, you have been bothering me. Even after death, you won't let go of me. My throat felt dry and tight. What could I say? Apologize for not being a foolish shield and rushing to you? Apologize for not being able to hold back and becoming a self-righteous hero? I'm quite flattered. I tried to make my tone lighter, but don't you think it's a bit exaggerated? We haven't seen each other that many times, and you even don't know me well. For a moment, a crack appeared in his cold mask, and the corner of his mouth slightly curled up. A smile almost formed. But the next second, that bit of relaxation disappeared, and it was once again covered by the cold, steel-like coldness. I'm not joking. His voice was deep like a deep pool. I tell you, Suin, if you disappear again, I will burn the whole world. My heart contracted abruptly, and I jumped. I wanted to reach out and touch his arm, to tell him he was not alone. But the air pressure around him was too suffocating, like a dense, airtight net, challenging whether I dared to move, whether I dared to test the bottom line of his obsession. But I still forced myself to lift my hand, the tips trembling, gently falling on his sleeve. Okay, I won't disappear, I whispered, my breath trembling. Don't destroy the world. If you need someone to blame, someone to rely on, just hold me. His pupils dilated abruptly, surprise bursting like a sprout, briefly appearing in the storm in his eyes. Then he leaned closer, his lips brushing against my ear, his voice softened slightly, but still carrying lethal danger. Be careful with the promises you make, Suin. I might never let go of you. At this moment, I suddenly realized that the boy I saved with all my might never disappeared. It's just that the man he has grown into will never let me leave. If you have ever been watched with eyes that see you as the center of his world, you might think it's romantic, special. But when Rono looked at me with that gaze, I only felt like I was drowning. His pupils were as black as ink, swallowing all the light around, even his breath carried an oppressive weight. Since he pressed me against the wall, he hasn't moved. His fingers still held my chin, the pressure not heavy, but with an unbreakable sense of control. I stood still, my body pulled between panic-induced trembling and an inexplicable throbbing. I tried to break the stagnant air, and I laughed dryly twice. Hey, if you greet guests like this, it's no wonder everyone calls you the master. He didn't laugh. His voice was deep like the lowest note of a cello, wrapped in an emotion I couldn't understand. Do you want to know what I remember? I froze instantly. The system's warning was still whirring in my mind, but curiosity was like a wildfire burning. Remember what? His eyes narrowed again, and the mask of master appeared for the first time with a clear crack. I remember you rushing to me in the alley, the blade piercing your chest, and the warm blood splashing on my hand. His voice was delivered one by one, like a knife carving on bone. I remember dragging me out of the hands of the traffickers, myself injured, but still smiling, as if it was enough as long as I was okay. I still remember the forest. When the beast's claws swung, you pushed me away, and I heard the sound of your bones shattering. He increased the pressure on my chin abruptly, forcing me to look straight into his eyes. Every word was like a knife, piercing the deepest part of my memory. Those memories had me as the main character, and also hidden in them, those scars, even after countless world resets, had never truly faded. Hearing his words, my throat instantly closed up. Do you know what this means to me? His voice trembled, his eyes swirling with extreme pain and obsession. It's not gratitude. Never has been. It has long been twisted and rotted. He smiled slightly, not a smile, but a cold irony colder than ice. Suin, it has become an obsession. Every time you die, I feel like I'm going crazy. Every time you disappear, I can only grasp the residual shadow in the air, and desperately want to pull you back. His voice sank to the extreme, becoming a whisper that brushed against my ear. So when you appear again, I swear, I will never let you leave. Never. My heart beat so hard it felt like it was going to break my ribs. It turned out that everything was true. All my sacrifices had not saved him, but instead left an indelible mark on his heart. My death did not give him hope, but instead planted a poison vine deep in his soul, which had now blossomed in front of me, beautiful and deadly. Wow. I sighed in my mind. Before fans analyzed that he was a sickly sweet character, I thought it was an overinterpretation. Now it seems to be realistic. He leaned closer, his forehead completely touching mine, his voice gentle and tender, almost passionate, but every word was a chain. Suin, you are mine. Your life, your death, your blood, your smile, all are mine. I took a deep breath, trembling, and forced myself to meet his gaze. Ronu, you scared me. A faint hesitation appeared in his eyes, even with a trace of barely perceptible guilt. But that bit of emotion disappeared in an instant, and was once again covered by the coldness. Scaring you is good, he said, so you won't leave. Keep being afraid. Keep living. This is enough. His fingers gently brushed my cheek. The action was too inappropriate to be gentle, but because of his words, it seemed particularly cruel. The system in my mind started buzzing again, the red warnings popping up one after another. Warning. Target blackening value is rising. Host, please avoid risks. It's really funny. But looking at the pain and obsession in his eyes, looking at the man who remembers every one of my deaths, I suddenly realized that perhaps the meaning of my coming here was never just to prevent him from blackening. Perhaps, more importantly, is how we two can live together. I couldn't help but softly open my mouth, my voice with a tolerance I didn't realize. You're really a fool, you know? His eyes narrowed abruptly, and a dangerous aura enveloped the air instantly. Yet, I met his gaze with a faint smile, a smile that was anything but casual, even as the pressure around me was almost suffocating. If you think scaring me will make me live well, then you actually don't know me at all. This time, he truly hesitated. A clear crack appeared on his cold, hard mask. Through that crack, I seemed to see the boy from years ago, injured all over in an alley, yet still managing to show me a fragile gaze. Bound to the tyrant and becoming a prisoner of the most terrifying person in the cultivation world, this was a far cry from the image I had of myself while I was following the online updates of Dragon Book. I was not locked in a damp, foul dungeon, where rats gnawed at my toes. My prison was a luxurious pavilion adorned with intricate carvings at the core of his fortress. Silk cushions lined the walls, the carpet soft as the cotton clouds in the sky. I stared at my dusty boots, not daring to step down lightly. The delicacies on the table were exquisite, like high-end restaurant advertisements, with a fragrant mist floating through the air. If it weren't for the invisible shackle of not to leave, and if my guard wasn't the man who once vowed to bury the entire world with me, I might have forgotten my identity as a prisoner. Congratulations, Suin, I mocked myself with a light chuckle to the empty room, from a reclusive otaku bookworm behind a computer screen to a pampered prisoner in the sky. Next step. Maybe I should develop Stockholm Syndrome? The door hinge creaked softly, a very faint click piercing the silence. My blood froze instantly, and I stood still. He walked in. It was the Dragon Book. His dark robes trailed like ink on the ground, like an unbreakable shadow, his black hair tied back with a silver brooch, revealing a smooth, full forehead, with eyebrows and eyes sculpted like chisels, hard as if carved from stone. Even standing still, his presence filled the room, distorting the air around. But when his gaze fell on me, the icy chill in his eyes seemed to melt slightly. You're awake, he said, his voice deep like a cello, controlled and emotionless. I adjusted my clothes. The irony was obvious in my tone. Awake, well-fed, had a hot bath, and didn't rot in a gutter, thanks to the 5-star treatment of the dragon tyrant. He furrowed his brow, his fingers unconsciously rubbing the edge of his sleeve. Do you like chains? My heartbeat accelerated abruptly, and I shook my head quickly. No, I don't. This is fine. You are truly merciful. In the afternoon, he took me to a gathering I had thought would be tedious. Yet, I had not expected to be seated in the front row, witnessing the most naked hypocrisy in the cultivation world. Those so-called leaders of justice, dressed in flowing robes, appeared dignified and self-righteous, full of self-conceited nobility. They bowed deeply to the Dragon Book, their words sweet as honey, but their eyes harbored surging calculations. Dragon Lord, if you could suddenly realize and return to the right path, even heaven would celebrate, one said with feigned piety. Another, with a sickly smile, capitalized on the moment. Yes, such a world-renowned talent buried in darkness is truly a waste. Return to the light, and all past mistakes will be forgiven. Past mistakes? Did they mean the years he was beaten, starved, and chased like a stray dog across the internet? I clenched my fists silently, the knuckles white. But the dragon book did not retreat. He sat on the dark throne, cold and solemn, his expression enigmatic. Forgiveness? He repeated the word, its tone light as a silk ribbon wrapped around a blade. Forgiving you, making me struggle for survival in the abyss. Enduring all the suffering you inflicted? Tell me, what should I forgive? The hall fell into silence instantly. I swallowed hard, looking at those just and upright people. Their smiles grew more rigid, their masks of hypocrisy cracking under the dragon book's questioning. I suddenly understood. His coldness was not arbitrary cruelty, but accumulated anger from 1,000 years, a weapon forged by loneliness. The so-called darkness on him was merely a reflection of these pseudo-sages' false faces. That night, back in this golden cage, I took the initiative to meet his gaze. At that moment, he was removing his robe, his back straight as a pine, every movement precise and almost rigid. You hate them, I said, my tone calm, not a question but a statement. He looked up at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, then turned into a faint sneer. Observation skills, finally making some progress. I ignored his provocation and continued, it's them who turned you into this, isn't it? Talking in the language of sages, yet abandoned you when you needed help the most. Now they pretend to sincerely advise you to return to the light, as if the past injuries never existed. He halted his undressing abruptly. For a moment, his cold, hard mask shattered, his shoulders tensed slightly, and a deep, primitive pain flickered in his eyes. But the emotion vanished instantly, like a mirage, replaced by an even heavier coldness. You don't understand anything, he said. Maybe, I softly replied, but I know one thing, your darkening is not because of cruelty, but because of too much, too long loneliness. Every time trust is betrayed, every time you lose everything, you are forced to close yourself off a little more. I wanted to say you're no longer alone, but the words were caught in my throat. Because I knew that once spoken, it meant a commitment I could not withdraw. And the most terrifying truth was that people like the Dragon Book would never let go of anything they had grasped. That night, lying on the overly soft bed, I stared at the silk canopy with intricate embroidery above, and whispered to myself softly, he doesn't need to be saved from cruelty, he needs to be redeemed from loneliness. But this time, I was uncertain if I had the ability to complete this redemption. I should have known that peace would never last long. When you are in the world of the novel Wuya, a brief period of tranquility is just the prelude to swordplay, explosions, and the roar of revenge. Indeed, the night sky was pierced by the urgent sound of war drums and the rockets streaking across the sky, the arrows trailing fiery tails as they cut through the darkness. The entire fortress trembled, the intense explosion sounds piercing through the outer walls, smoke billowing up. An ambush had come. The courtyard was engulfed in chaos. Cultivators in dark armor and those so-called just followers were engaged in combat, the clinking sound of metal and the screams of the dying weaving a hellish scene. The smell of blood and smoke quickly filled the air, thick and heavy, making breathing difficult. In the center of the battlefield stood the Dragon Book. He was like the eye of a storm, surrounded by a silent calm. His aura was powerful as the mountains and seas, his long sword seemed to be an extension of his will, each slash carrying the power to destroy the heavens and the earth, his moves fierce and swift, leaving one's eyes unable to keep up. Even surrounded by enemies, his posture never wavered, and the sight of his blood-soaked struggle was breathtakingly magnificent. But at that moment, I saw a traitor take advantage of the chaos. Quietly approaching from behind, his dagger gleaming with frosty light, raised high, aimed at his unguarded back. Thoughts had not yet formed, but my body had already acted. I sprinted with all my might, my lungs burning from the intense running, my throat forcing out a hoarse shout, "Dragon Book, watch out behind you!" I was not strong, and compared to him, my cultivation was even negligible. I could only barely maintain my balance, even if it meant just blocking this attack for him, just to push him away, to let him avoid this deadly ambush. However, a hand like an iron clamp grasped my wrist with such force that it almost crushed my bones. In the next second, second, the dagger hadn't even reached the dragon book before the traitor was flung out like a rag doll, crashing heavily onto the courtyard steps, the sound of his bones shattering echoing clearly. And I was pressed against the dragon book's chest. His arms wrapped tightly around my waist, the force so great that it seemed as if he was afraid I would disappear into smoke the next moment. "Did you think I wanted to live in a world without you?" His voice was hot, filled with uncontrolled anger and despair, each word hammering into my heart, more suffocating than the clashing of swords on the battlefield. His eyes were burning with a wild flame. "I can fight against tens of thousands of soldiers, I can destroy empires and dynasties. But if you die again, Suan, I will destroy everything in this world. Because, without you, the world is not worth existing." My chest felt as if something was tugging at it, a dense, piercing pain. How can I refute that? How can I tell him not to be so obsessed with me? But looking into his eyes filled with despair, all my words got stuck in my throat. So, I smiled. Weakly, confusedly, tremblingly. "Long Shu, you're such an idiot." His eyes narrowed abruptly, their color deepening. "I've liked you from the very beginning." The words slipped out uncontrollably, shattering all the barriers between us. Long Shu's breath halted abruptly. I might as well throw caution to the wind, let the long-suppressed emotions gush out like a flood. "Before I came into this world, before I was just following your story behind the computer screen, I liked you. I read your story in the novel, argued about your right and wrong on the forum, and made you my favorite character. Not because you're perfect, but precisely because you're not perfect. Whether as an antagonist, or even if the whole world misunderstands you, I can still see that unextinguished light in your bones." I looked up, truly and seriously at this man who uses loneliness as armor. "I admire you, have always admired you. Not for the character in the novel, not for this terrifying overlord, but for you, Long Shu himself." The noise of the battlefield seemed to be instantly cut off, leaving only me and him in the universe. Long Shu stood still, my words like the sharpest blade, piercing through all his defenses. He slowly approached me, his eyes locked on mine, as if searching for the slightest bit of lie. When he confirmed that there was only honest, trembling sincerity in my eyes, he abruptly shortened the distance between us. His lips covered mine, rough and urgent, with the desperation of a drowning person grabbing at a piece of driftwood, as if I were his only heir. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, almost bursting out. I awkwardly responded to his kiss, my fingers tightly gripping his dark robe, as if anchoring myself in the vast ocean. This was not a kiss of an overlord, not a kiss of a strong man. It was a boy who had lost too much, finally grasping a thread of warmth, and no longer willing to let go. We slowly parted ways after what felt like an eternity, both of us breathless. His forehead rested against mine, his warm breath sprinkling over my face, carrying his unique cold scent. "From the moment you first resurrected, I knew you were not from this world." His voice was deep and hoarse. "But that's irrelevant. No matter where you come from, no matter if all this is real, right now, in this world, you are mine. Don't forget." This time, his voice was light like a whisper, with a trace of almost imploring fragility. I lifted my hand tremblingly, using my thumb to gently stroke his tense jawline, and smiled. "Then you'd better get used to it, because I'll be staying by your side. Because I won't die anymore." For the first time, Long Shu's lips curled slightly upwards. It was just a shallow arc, but like the melting of ice, it instantly dispelled the gloom around him. The war was still raging, and blood was still flowing. But amidst the flames and the blood-red sunset, something fragile and real had quietly grown between us. Not obsessed admiration, not heavy sacrifice, perhaps that was love. When consciousness returned, I fell into a boundless void of desolation. Without the soft silk bed, without the overlord's hot breath hovering by my neck, only the dead silence of white extending to eternity, carrying that cursed, lifeless mechanical sound, repeatedly colliding in the emptiness. Detected abnormal fluctuations of the host. Blackening value is nearing the threshold. The probability of world collapse is 78%. Solution: execute the stability sacrifice protocol. The host terminates existence. I grunted, covering my eyes with my hand, and asked through the gaps between my fingers, in a hoarse voice, "Do you want me to die again?" Confirmed. A bone-chilling coldness climbed up my spine. I sat up abruptly, my teeth clamping together, the anger in my chest almost bursting out of my throat. "Have you not seen? My death never solves any problem. It only makes everything worse. Long Shu will remember that every time I give up on myself, it only pushes him deeper into the abyss. Host's emotional priority is lower than world stability. This sacrifice is a necessary condition. After this execution, the host's memories of the target object will be simultaneously erased. The cold sound waves were like icicles piercing my eardrums. I froze for a moment, almost giving in to the instinct that was etched into my bones. A voice in my heart whispered, "If this can save him, isn't it worth it?" But the next second, Rong Shu's face became clear. The furrowed brow when he was angry, the deep voice that echoed in my ears when he roared, and that resounding question, "Do you think I want to live in a world without you?" When he kissed me, the force was devout and urgent, as if I were his only anchor in the world, the only light in his darkness. I can't repeat the same mistake. I stood up abruptly, my knuckles white, my nails almost embedded in my palm, and I shouted at nothing, "No, I will no longer die for your script, nor will I let you alter his memories. I choose him, no matter the cost." The mechanical sound of the system suddenly went out of tune, accompanied by a harsh current sound, detected host's refusal of order. The probability of world collapse has increased to 89%. Initiate the reinitialization protocol. Before the words were finished, the void space cracked abruptly, like shattered glass by a hammer. I coughed violently, my consciousness pulled back by a great force, and I stumbled to the ground with dizziness. The first thing that caught my eye was Rong Shu's face so close. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his dark pupils swirling with a storm of rage, the air pressure around him so low as to be almost suffocating. "You disappeared." His voice was hoarse like it had been abraded by sandpaper, every word trembling with the edge of burst. "Where did you go?" I opened my mouth, my words tangled in my throat, my breathing trembling. The system wants me to die. It says this is the only way to stabilize the world." Before the last sentence was finished, Rong Shu reached out and pulled me into his arms with a force that was almost as if he was embedding me into his bones. His breath was hot, spilling over my neck, causing the air around to tremble. "If it dares to touch you again, I'll destroy it." His voice came from his chest, with a destroying decisiveness. "Even if it's hidden in the heavens above, I'll tear it into shreds with my own hands." The last few words had become a roaring outburst of anger. I froze in his arms, first shocked, then couldn't help but lean against his shoulder, laughing weakly, tears flowing uncontrollably. "You can't kill a system. This is not a fair fight." He suddenly let go of me, cupping my face with both hands, the pressure of his fingers almost painful to my jawline, his eyes swirling with a terrifying obsession and madness. "Anything that tries to take you away from me should die." This time, I didn't retort. There was no hesitation in his tone. His anger was real, his determination was real, and that I would destroy everything for you was real. I even believed he could really do it. A terrifying realization emerged in my heart. If the system continues to apply pressure, he might really go to any length to fight against that intangible existence, even if the cost is to burn the whole world down. "Rong Shu," my voice was light as a breeze, with an uncontrollable tremble, "I don't want to die, not for the so-called plot, not for this world. I just want to be with you." His eyes filled with a storm of pain. His hand moved to the back of my neck, squeezing tightly, pressing my forehead against his, their hot breath intertwining together. "Stay!" His voice was rough and almost choking. "No matter what happens, no matter how much we have to burn, you must stay." I swallowed his exhaled heat, the tense nerves finally relaxed. The next second, his kiss fell, no longer the desperate seeking of before, but slow, deep, with a hot temperature, spreading like flames through my veins. His lips traced my lips, as if carving an eternal contract, every turn telling of not wanting to lose. I trembled, raising my hand, gripping his robe, pulling him closer, wanting to melt into his bones. This kiss dispelled the fear brought by the system, drowned out the worries about the world's collapse. And in the universe, there seemed to be only his breath, his temperature, and his unwavering embrace. Until we could no longer breathe, he slowly stepped back, his thumb gently rubbing my numbed lips. The movement was so reverent as if touching a priceless treasure. "You chose me," he whispered, his voice carrying a trace of unperceived fragility. I looked into his eyes filled with deep affection. Although my body was still trembling, I smiled with an unwavering confidence. "I have always been choosing you." His eyes softened instantly, soft enough to completely envelop me. The warning voice of the system was still sharp in my mind. But this time, I paid no attention. I am no longer a pawn at the mercy of the system's chessboard. I am Rong Shu's, nothing more. The sky abruptly split open into a massive crack, not a metaphor, but a literal, shattering break as if the world itself were about to collapse. Dazzling light poured out of the crack, resembling molten gold, blinding and piercing to the point of making one's eyes unable to open. The mountains beneath my feet trembled violently, stones falling, and the distant river boiled into rolling white mist. The warning sounds of the system screamed in my mind, sharp enough to almost tear my nerves apart. The probability of world collapse is 92%, and the final deviation cannot be corrected. Forcefully initiate the sacrifice program. Fate always loves to play the most cruel jokes. Just as the heavens and earth were about to be overturned, so-called heroes descended on us, shining with sword light. They wore flowing robes, held weapons that glowed with sacred light, and their voices were filled with a self-righteous sense of justice. Rong Shu, your reign of tyranny ends today, the leader shouted, pointing his sword directly at us in our direction. Tyranny? I sneered. It's just a group of hypocrites hiding behind the cloak of justice. Rong Shu's laughter suddenly echoed, sharp as a steel blade unsheathed, carrying a destructive arrogance. His aura abruptly burst forth, black mist intertwining with silver spiritual energy to form a raging storm that swept across the battlefield, even the air trembling with it. In the past, I might have felt fear facing such an array. But standing next to Rong Shu now, I felt an unprecedented sense of security. I wasn't planning to charge ahead alone this time, we would face it together. Kill! The heroes roared in unison, charging with swords and spears, their swordlight intersecting to form an impenetrable net. I immediately raised my hand, channeling all the spiritual energy within me to condense a transparent barrier in front of me. This barrier seemed so fragile against the formidable foe, as if it would shatter with a single strike, but just as the enemy's blade and spear were about to fall, Rong Shu's arm suddenly wrapped around my waist, firmly holding me behind him. Stay behind me. His voice was deep and authoritative, with an unchallengeable command. To hell with it. If we're going to fight, let's fight together. I grabbed his sleeve with a resolute tone. He turned to look at me, the fury and despair in his eyes softened for a moment upon meeting my gaze. Then, he nodded heavily, his voice adding a touch of decisiveness. All right. Let's fight together. The battle erupted instantly. Swordlight clashed with spiritual energy, producing deafening booms, the glow of spells and the shockwaves of magic intertwined, light and shadow fiercely struggling under the shattered sky. I exerted all my strength to hold up on the battlefield, constantly casting spells, occasionally erupting with flames to try to block the enemy's attacks. Most of the time, I was barely surviving, but whenever danger approached, Rong Shu would always appear by my side first. He no longer stood by idly watching me die, no longer letting me guard him alone. This time, he stood in front of me, using his body to build an unbreakable barrier. The feeling of being firmly protected was both strange and warm, heating my heart. I was no longer just an existence to be sacrificed. I was his partner, someone fighting side by side with him. The system's voice grew increasingly frantic, almost taking over my entire mind. The despair timeline cannot be reversed. The host's termination must be executed. Otherwise, the world will be completely annihilated. A sudden, intense pain shot through my chest. My legs weakened, and I nearly fell to my knees. A cultivator took the opportunity to slash at me with a sword, the blade wrapped in rich spiritual energy, carrying a deadly chill. To die! Rong Shu's roar echoed throughout the heavens and earth, his eyes boiling with a bloodthirsty madness. He swept his long sword with a mighty slash, a silver blade of spirit energy howling out and instantly knocking down 3 cultivators charging forward. Then, he took a few steps to my side, pulled me into his arms, and held my head tightly against his chest, protecting me with his own body. Even heaven cannot take you from me. His voice was hoarse and ferocious, his aura darker than ever, yet with a comforting and burning warmth. System, plot, fate, whatever it is, dare to touch him again, and I will overturn the entire world. His spiritual energy abruptly surged, forming a black protective shield that enveloped us both. The sky trembled once more, and I even felt a momentary hesitation in the system's voice. It seemed truly startled by Rong Shu's decisiveness. I clutched his robe tightly, gasping for breath, looking up at his sharp jawline, and softly said, Rong Shu, we don't have to fight them to the death. If this world is destined to collapse, let it collapse. As long as you're here, I'll rebuild a new world with you. He looked down, his forehead resting against mine, his hot breath on my face, filled with anger and the ultimate love. With your words, that's enough. My throat tightened suddenly, and I couldn't speak. The sky above was splitting wider, scorching light pouring down as if to burn the world to the ground. This could be the end, or perhaps a new beginning. I knew that some things had to be said. Rong Shu, I leaned close to his ear, my voice light as a whisper but filled with unshakable determination. Even if I have to die 1,000 times, 10,000 times, as long as it's for being with you, it's all worth it. His arm tightened abruptly, holding me tightly in his embrace, his body trembling uncontrollably. No, his voice was hoarse and almost shattered. This time, you must live for me, and live forever. Before I could respond, his kiss fell upon me. This time, there was no despair, no haste, only an enduring stability and determination. This kiss was like an eternal monument, like a contract spanning life and death, declaring eternal, only us. I closed my eyes, responding to his kiss with all my might, tears uncontrollably sliding down, mixing with his breath. The world around us shattered. Mountains collapsed, rivers dried up, and light devoured everything, but I didn't care. As long as I was with him, even if I fell into endless darkness, I would be willing to endure it. Our bond had long transcended life and death, transcended the world, becoming eternal.